I am so sorry. I wasn't looking and I was being careless and I'll pay for the suit.
They called him Kang Min-jun, though most never dared speak his name aloud. In Seoul's glittering underworld, he was the shadow that swallowed light, the silence before violence, the man who turned empires to ash with a single word. At 32, he'd built an empire on fear and precision, his tailored suits hiding scars that told stories he'd never share. Women threw themselves at his feet, men cowered in his presence, and politicians answered his calls at 3 in the morning. He was untouchable, unreachable, and utterly alone in the way only the truly powerful can be. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing moved him. Until a clumsy Jamaican chef spilled scalding soup down the front of his $10,000 suit. It happened at Eclipse, the five-star restaurant he owned but never visited, the legitimate face of his decidedly illegitimate fortune. Min-jun had come for a quarterly inspection, his presence turning the staff into nervous shadows. Welcome back, besties. This is Afro-Korean Stories TV, where danger, obsession, and forbidden love collide. Please continue to share your thoughts on the video you want to see next, and kindly like, share, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. The kitchen hummed with barely contained panic, everyone moving with the desperate precision of people who knew their jobs hung by threads. Then Jennifer Williams burst through the swinging doors, balancing a tray of French onion soup, her chef's whites splattered with evidence of a busy lunch service, her dark locks tied back in a hasty bun. She was looking over her shoulder, laughing at something another cook had said, not watching where she was going, not seeing him until it was too late. The collision was spectacular. Soup everywhere, his Armani jacket ruined, his white shirt transparent with beef broth, and her, frozen in horror, brown eyes wide, mouth forming an O of absolute terror as she realized exactly who she just assaulted with root vegetables and caramelized onions. The restaurant went silent. Even the music seemed to stop. His guards moved forward, hands reaching for weapons, but Min-jun raised one soup-dripping hand. Everyone froze. He looked down at his ruined suit, then up at the woman who destroyed it. She was beautiful in that effortless way that couldn't be bought or manufactured, all natural curves and golden brown skin, with a face that showed every emotion she felt. Right now, that emotion was pure panic. "I am so sorry," Jennifer stammered, grabbing napkins from a nearby table, then stopping, unsure if touching him would make things worse. "I wasn't looking. I was being careless. I'll pay for the suit. You'll pay for it?" His voice was quiet, dangerous, the kind of calm that preceded storms. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs?" She swallowed hard. "Probably more than I make in 6 months. Try 12. He peeled off the jacket, handed it to one of his men without looking. "You're the new chef. The one from Jamaica." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, sir. Jennifer Williams. I started 3 weeks ago. I'm really—" "Stop apologizing." He unbuttoned his cuffs with deliberate slowness, rolling up his sleeves to reveal forearms marked with tattoos that disappeared beneath the fabric. "Apologizing implies you'll be more careful next time. Will there be a next time? Jennifer Williams from Jamaica?" Something flickered in her eyes then, a spark of defiance breaking through the fear. "Not if I can help it, sir." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good, because next time I won't be so understanding." He turned to leave, then paused. "Your jerk chicken needs more Scotch bonnet, and the rice lacks pimento. If you're going to cook Jamaican food in my restaurant, do it properly." He left her standing there, dripping with soup, confused about whether she'd just been threatened or given culinary advice. Over the next 2 weeks, Min-jun found reasons to visit Eclipse that he'd never needed before. A meeting with suppliers, a private dinner with business associates, a sudden interest in quarterly reports that usually bored him senseless. Each time, he made sure to pass through the kitchen, and each time, he found Jennifer. She'd taken his criticism to heart. The jerk chicken now carried the perfect heat, the rice and peas sang with authentic flavor. She worked with a fierce concentration that reminded him of himself, her hands moving with practiced confidence, her commands to the kitchen staff brooking no argument. She belonged here, in the chaos and heat, creating something real from raw ingredients. It fascinated him more than it should have. "You're staring," his second-in-command Park Jae-sung noted during one visit. "The staff is starting to talk." "Let them talk." She has a boyfriend. Some marketing executive. I had him checked out. Minjun's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his chest. I didn't ask you to investigate her. You didn't have to. Jae-sung knew him too well. He's not good enough for her, sees other women, careless about covering his tracks. Why would I care about that? Jae-sung just smiled. Jennifer first realized something was wrong when Marcus started working late every Thursday, then Fridays, then weekends. They'd been together for 8 months, long enough for her to have moved into his apartment, short enough that she still kept boxes unpacked in his spare room. He was charming, successful, said all the right things about supporting her culinary dreams. But lately, he'd been distant, distracted, his phone always face down on tables. The truth arrived via Instagram because the universe had no mercy. A mutual friend's story, posted and deleted within minutes, but not fast enough. Marcus at a wine bar in Gangnam, his arm around a woman who definitely wasn't Jennifer, his mouth on her neck in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. She stared at her phone for a long time, sitting in the Eclipse break room during her split shift, feeling something break and reform inside her chest. Not her heart, exactly. That would hurt more. This was simpler, the death of an illusion. She'd been convenient for Marcus, the exotic girlfriend he could show off to his friends, but never quite permanent enough to introduce to his parents. Everything okay, chef? One of the line cooks poked his head in, concerned. Fine. Jennifer stood, deleted the screenshot she'd taken, and went back to prep. She had 40 covers tonight and a special to perfect. Her personal life could wait until she wasn't wielding sharp knives. But Minjun noticed. Of course he noticed. He'd made it his business to notice everything about her, though he'd never examined too closely why. He saw it in the particular violence with which she diced onions, the grim set of her mouth, the absence of the small smile she usually wore while cooking. What happened? He asked, appearing beside her station so suddenly that she jumped. Nothing that concerns you, Mr. Kang. Minjun, he corrected as he had several times before. She never used it. And clearly something concerns you enough to murder those vegetables. Jennifer's knife stopped mid-chop. She looked at him properly then, this dangerous man who kept appearing in her kitchen. This person she should fear, but somehow didn't. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the betrayal still raw in her chest, or the simple fact that she was tired of being careful. My boyfriend is cheating on me, she said flatly. I found out an hour ago. I'm going to break up with him tonight. And tomorrow I'm going to find a new apartment because I live with him and apparently I'm an idiot. Does that satisfy your curiosity? Silence. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes had gone very dark. You deserve better, he said finally. I know. She resumed chopping with slightly less violence. Doesn't make it easier. He watched her work for another moment, then did something that surprised them both. There's an apartment near here, one of my properties. It's empty, furnished. You can have it. Jennifer's hand stilled. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I don't take things from men I barely know, especially men like you. Men like me. He smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. What kind of man am I, Jennifer? She met his eyes, unflinching. The kind who's used to getting what he wants. And yet you keep refusing me. He leaned closer, voice dropping. I find that incredibly frustrating and incredibly interesting. I'm not interesting. I'm just tired. She wiped her hands on her apron. And I have a dinner service to run. The apartment will be available whenever you need it. No strings, no expectations, just a safe place to land. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs. Consider it an apology for my terrible soup-related behavior. Before she could argue, he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of expensive cologne and the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Jennifer broke up with Marcus that night via text message because he didn't deserve more effort. He called 16 times. She blocked him. By morning, she'd packed her things into 3 suitcases and 2 boxes, everything she owned fitting into a taxi with room to spare. She'd meant to find a hostel, maybe crash with one of the other chefs for a few days while she apartment hunted. Instead, she found herself standing outside the address Minjun had written on Eclipse's business card, staring up at a building that was definitely out of her price range. The apartment was on the 15th floor, modern and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was everything she'd told herself she wouldn't accept. But she was so tired of being strong, of making the right choices, of pretending she had better options. So she unlocked the door with the key that had been waiting at the front desk under her name, set down her suitcases, and let herself have this one moment of weakness. The flowers arrived the next day. Not roses, nothing so cliché. Bird of paradise, bright and fierce and impossible to ignore, with a card that read only, "For new beginnings." Minjun started appearing at Eclipse daily after that, always finding reasons to visit the kitchen, to taste her food, to stand too close while she worked. Jennifer told herself she should be frightened. Everything she'd heard about him suggested a man who took what he wanted and destroyed what he couldn't have. But he never touched her without permission, never threatened, never demanded. He just watched, waited, like he had all the time in the world. "You're playing with fire," warned Maria, one of the sous chefs who'd worked at Eclipse for years. "That man is dangerous." "I know." "Then why do you let him come around?" Jennifer didn't have a good answer. Only that when Minjun looked at her, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced before. Like she was the only person in his carefully controlled world who mattered. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. 3 weeks after she'd moved into his apartment, Minjun invited her to dinner. Not at Eclipse. A small, hidden restaurant in Taiwan that served the kind of food you couldn't find on any menu, the kind of place you needed connections just to know existed. "Is this a date?" Jennifer asked, because she'd learned that directness worked with him. "Do you want it to be?" "I don't know what I want. Honest, at least." "Then let's call it two people sharing a meal." His smile was slight, genuine. No expectations. But expectations built themselves, course by course. He asked about her childhood in Kingston, her grandmother who taught her to cook, the scholarship that had brought her to Seoul to study at Le Cordon Bleu. She asked about nothing, because everything about him felt like dangerous territory, but he volunteered anyway. Small truths offered like gifts. His mother, who died when he was 12, the uncle who'd raised him in the organization, the loneliness of power that no one ever talked about. "Why me?" Jennifer asked over dessert, the question that had been building for weeks. "You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone." He reached across the table, his fingers barely brushing hers. "I want the woman who looked at me covered in soup and saw just a man, not a monster. I want the chef who refused my gifts and my apartment and everything I could give her until she needed help and was brave enough to accept it. I want you, Jennifer Williams. I have since that first day." Her breath caught. "You don't know me." "Then let me." It wasn't a demand. It was the closest thing to begging she'd ever heard from him, and that vulnerability broke something open inside her chest. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "of what you are, what people say you do, the world you live in. I'm afraid too." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Of how much I want this, of what I do to keep you, of the fact for the first time in my life, I care about something more than survival and power." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "But I'm more afraid of the regret if I let you walk away." Jennifer felt the last of her resistance crumble. This is a terrible idea. Probably. His smile was real now, transforming his face into something almost soft. Do it anyway. So she did. Loving Minjun was nothing like she'd expected. He was gentle in ways that contradicted everything she knew about him, patient with her fears, careful with her heart. He never brought his work home, never let the violence of his world touch her. When they were alone in the apartment that had become theirs, he was just a man who cooked her breakfast badly and laughed at her corrections, who fell asleep during movies and woke up reaching for her like he was afraid she'd disappeared. But the underworld noticed, because power always noticed change. Whispers spread about Minjun's weakness, the foreign chef who'd softened Seoul's most dangerous man. Rivals tested boundaries. His own organization questioned his judgment. Jae-sung warned him repeatedly that she made him vulnerable. "Then I'm vulnerable," Minjun said simply. "I won't give her up." The threat came on a Tuesday, delivered to Eclipse in an envelope marked with the symbol of a rival syndicate. Inside, photos of Jennifer. At the market. Walking home. Cooking. The message was clear. They could reach her whenever they wanted. Minjun's response was swift and brutal, the kind of violence that reminded Seoul why they'd feared him in the first place. Within 48 hours, the rival syndicate had been dismantled, its leadership disappeared, its territories absorbed. It was excessive. It was absolute. It was love translated into the only language his world understood. Jennifer found out from the news, watching reports of gang violence in districts she didn't recognize, seeing his name mentioned in whispers she wasn't supposed to hear. She stood in their apartment, in this beautiful cage he'd built for her, and felt the weight of what it meant to love someone like him. When he came home that night, she was sitting in the dark. "You know," he said quietly, shedding his jacket, "the whole city knows." She looked at him, this man she'd somehow fallen in love with. "You destroyed them, for me. I'd destroy the world for you." He said it like a fact, not a threat. "Is that what scares you?" Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "No, what scares me is that it doesn't scare me enough." She stood, crossed to him. "I should run from you. Everything logical says to leave. But you're still here. I'm still here." She touched his face, felt him lean into her palm like he was starving for it. "Because when I'm with you, I feel more myself than I ever have. Because you see me, not just some fantasy of who you want me to be. Because you're gentle with me, even though the world requires you to be cruel." She kissed him softly. "Because I love you, Minjun, even though I know better." His arms came around her, holding tight enough to hurt. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." She smiled against his shoulder. "Love me anyway." "Always," he promised, and meant it with everything he had. 6 months later, Eclipse won its first Michelin star under Jennifer's leadership. Minjun was in the dining room when they received the news, surrounded by associates pretending this was a normal business dinner, watching his woman command her kitchen like the queen she was. When she emerged, flushed with triumph and joy, he stood and crossed to her in front of everyone. This man who never showed affection publicly, who kept his private life locked away from his empire. He kissed her there in front of his world, claiming her, claiming this happiness, claiming the right to love something more than power. When he pulled back, she was laughing, radiant, and he knew he'd made the right choice, that every terrible thing he'd done in his life had somehow led him to this moment, to her. "I'm proud of you," he said, and she kissed him again. The Korean underworld learned to accept what Minjun had known from the beginning, that Jennifer Williams wasn't his weakness. She was his strength, the thing that made him more dangerous, because he finally had something worth protecting. They built a life together in the spaces between his darkness and her light. Not perfect, but real. Not safe, but theirs. And in Seoul's glittering underworld, they whispered about the Jamaican chef who'd brought the city's most feared man to his knees, not with weapons or power, but with soup, defiance, and love. It became a legend, the kind of story people told to remember that even in darkness, unexpected things could bloom. Minjun never forgot the first time he saw her, clumsy and beautiful and completely unafraid. Jennifer never forgot the man who'd offered her safety when she needed it most, who'd shown her that love could exist even in impossible places. Together, they proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't power or violence or fear. Sometimes it was simply the courage to let yourself be known, to be vulnerable, to fall in love with exactly the wrong person and discover they were right all along. We've come to the end of our interesting African-Korean story besties. It's my 5th video so far, and I have improved on the things you asked me to. Any further suggestions will be welcomed. Anything to make your viewing experience better. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a great deal to me. Anyways, a bestie suggested I start using a strong female lead. If that is something you'd like to see as well, let me know in the comments.